Chas, moving on to cricket. Yesterday, the Proteas levelling the series, but again, almost letting the opposition back into it.
Yeah.
Our bowling was phenomenal, but again, middle order seems to be an issue.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, in terms of the bowling, hats off to Morne Morkel, 5 for 21, his career best figures. You know, he really decimated the Australian team. You know, once they posted the 154, I think it was all out in with 12, was it 12 overs? They didn't bat out. You know, the writing looked to be on the wall. I thought we'd get there comfortably. It didn't turn out quite that way. Some rash shots played, I think, by the South Africans. You know, there were a couple of decisions made that surprised, I think, every supporter.
They seemed to be in a hurry, I found. I mean,
yeah,
we had so many overs to go.
It was. I think the commentator even joked that AB had a lunch appointment somewhere or a round of golf planned that he needed to get there, because he came out smoking and he took the attack to Mitchell Johnson, who was bowling pretty quickly. And then he got out to a fairly rash decision on his part, caught behind, and then there were some wickets that fell after that, and then it took Dale Steyn to eventually hit the winning runs, and we got there comfortably in the end. 3 wickets, you know, they're always misleading when you see a score won by 3 wickets. You think, okay, that wasn't too, it was pretty close, but you know, I never really thought we were going to lose. It was just like, oh, come on guys, why can't we just wrap this up? You know, some guys putting on his pads when he thought he wasn't needed. So, you know, like I said, the series all square now at 1-1. Perth shared one match apiece. They're off to Canberra now. So interesting how this series is going to pan out. We've talked a lot about the one-days matches in Australia being far more important than the 2020s that they did play. You know, I still think South Africa are going to win this series. They still look like they have the better bowling attack. I see Mitchell Johnson's now been rested for the rest of the series, so they're not going to have him. They've got Pat Cummins back, who youngster is bowling pretty quickly as well, and they're not going to lose anything in terms of pace. Obviously experience. Mitchell Johnson, one of apparently the world's best cricketers, been named Cricketer of the Year and Test Cricketer of the Year last week. So, you know, interesting. Australia have issues. Michael Clarke injuries, Steve Smith's got some injuries, Haddon's got injuries. So they're not looking to flash ahead of the World Cup. I think South Africa will take a lot of confidence out of this game. I think they won with something to spare still this weekend. I expect them to win the series still, whether it's 3-2 or 4-1. You know, I think, and then take massive confidence heading into the World Cup, which is now only, what is it, about 8 weeks away or 9 weeks away.
Rob, individual performances, who impressed you and who's a concern?
What I was intrigued by was the composition of the South African side, for starters. My jaw almost fell onto the floor when I read that the lineup that they'd picked, where they basically dropped Ryan McLaren, who has been struggling. They brought back Riley Rousseau, who of course is a non-bowler, which meant they were taking out basically a full complement bowler, if you like, a 10-over man out of the side, and entrusting Farhan Behardien, who's a little bit of a sort of, you know, dibbly-dob sort of medium pacer, who doesn't often even bowl full complements for the Titans, never mind for his country. So big risk taken there, but I applaud the team for actually taking that risk, because this is the time to experiment. They know that they've got a problem with the lack of depth in the batting, and it may have been one reason why AB de Villiers was in such a hurry to get the job done, because he's ever mindful of the fact that lower down in the South African order, you know, the old collywobbles can sort of take root, and I think he wanted to get the job done primarily because he was a little bit worried about exposing the tail, and thought, let's get back in the hut, you know, let's get this result out of the way. So perhaps a little bit of a sign of lack of confidence in the lower order. But coming back to Behardien, I thought he then bowled pretty reasonably. He's a guy who takes a bit of pace off the ball, so he's a different option to the sort of frontline 3 faster bowlers, if you like. And there are certain surfaces, not necessarily in Australia, I've got to say, but certain surfaces in the world where having a little niggly medium pacer who sort of grips the ball in the surface a little bit, takes the pace off, makes it difficult to hit boundaries off, isn't the worst idea in the world. And he came through reasonably okay as a bowler, including getting Shane Watson absolutely plumb in front. So that was a bonus for South Africa. I'm not sure if it's necessarily the way ahead, but when JP Dumini's fit again, he could potentially then perhaps share a 10-over quota, you know, between Dumini's off-spin and Behardien's medium pace. Maybe that's one way of deepening the batting and not affecting the bowling too much. So they're working on the balance of the team. Riley Rousseau, I thought, played beautifully, so some really commanding strokes before he unfortunately got out. He has got a little bit of a habit of sometimes when he gets in, getting out for sort of 30-something when he's just looking well set. He's got to learn how to sort of, you know, ram home the advantage as a batsman. But I thought the strokes he played were a powerful signal that South Africa were, you know, not wanting to mess about, wanted to level things up. And on the whole, a much more cohesive performance. Light years improved in the field. We didn't have the sort of Butterfingers syndrome that we had in the first game. So from that point of view, also very pleasing. And of course, as Garen said, Morne Morkel, best career figures and his second fifer, I think, in ODI. So lots to be quite encouraged about.
Faf sort of seems to, he's yet to sort of get off the mark and really put up a big score. But then Miller seems to, he had a lot of criticism going into the series. Seems to have, coped well with the pressure, particularly yesterday.
Yeah, I was impressed with Miller in Perth. He got big runs in the first game when South Africa went down, but he was almost struck a nice note of defiance. And then I thought he kept his head very well. He actually played a sort of anchoring role. As Garen said, some of the guys were a little bit frantic at the crease. I thought he actually, whose natural instincts are to sort of want to belt the ball, I thought he actually played quite a nice tight sort of half defensive sort of game, if you like, determined not to give his wicket away and to be unbeaten at the crease when we got over the line, which is what you want from the remaining senior batsman at the crease, if you like. So he started to tick a few boxes again, which was good.
And Garen, interesting venue for the next match in Canberra. I guess the whole series has been quite interesting sort of selection. Let me do that again. Sorry, guys.
Manuka Oval.
Okay. Garen, interesting choice of venue for the third game. And just looking at the first two clashes, the wickets seem markedly different, in the space of 2 days.
Yeah, I was going to say the Perth, they were talking about, the Perth wicket, notoriously one of the quicker wickets in Australia. It seemed to be a lot quicker, I thought, in the first game. The scores were a lot higher. Second match, 2 days later, suddenly a lot lower, even though South Africa were only chasing 150 odd. It didn't look like they were going to get that many more. So, yeah, obviously Australia, with a lot of venues for the Cricket World Cup, this Manuka Oval in Canberra, I don't know too much about it, but cricket is big and obviously in Australia. They've got a lot of choices for venues, obviously trying to spread it out between the 2020s and the ODIs. A little bit upset or disappointed to see only 11,000 people turn up for yesterday's match. They mentioned a number of times on TV, obviously a lot of South Africans living in Perth. Wasn't any other sporting event on in Perth, but only 11,000 turned up, which is not great. You get bigger crowds than that. I think in South Africa had those two had played. So maybe cricket's not as popular as we think over in Australia, or they're all saving their money for the upcoming World Cup. But yeah, interesting match scheduled for Wednesday morning now, 5:20 South African time, kicks off in Canberra. Hopefully we go 2-1 ahead in the series, but I don't know if Australia can't wait to get to Canberra. I don't know if they know anything about this wicket. I don't know if they're going to get the groundsman to prepare something that maybe doesn't suit the Dale Steyn, Vernon Fernandez, Morne Morkel, something that perhaps keeps it a little bit lower and slower. So remains to be seen.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thanks.